If you downloaded the training files that I provided, let's navigate to that folder and open the file trrx1. So before we import this file into Twinmotion, I'd like to go through some important points that we should take note of to make sure that we have a smooth workflow later on once we import this model into Twinmotion. The first thing to take note of is that we should ensure all our Revit elements have a distinct material applied to them. So that means if I click on this wall and I check its properties, the material parameter here shouldn't be set to by category. So it should have a default or a material applied to it, even if it's the default wall or default floor material, as long as it's distinct from the other elements inside the model. So if I have another wall with a different finish, I shouldn't see default wall applied to that particular wall. So that goes for all the elements in the model. So even if this mullions, if I check it, it should have a material applied to it. So even the furniture, as you can see, there's specific materials applied to the different parts of that model. So this way I will be able to easily manipulate those materials later on once it's in Twinmotion. The next thing we should take note of is that some materials or some actual materials are easier to apply here in Revit. What I mean by that is that so far, yes, we have materials applied to each and every element. That's good. But that doesn't mean this is the actual material we will see in our rendering. So this default wall, this gray tone, we actually intend to replace this material later on once it's in Twinmotion. If not replace it totally, we will enhance it once it's in Twinmotion. But for some materials, like the flooring here, if I isolate it and turn the visual style to realistic, you'll see that I have applied the actual carpet tile that I want to see in my rendering. So if I go inside, edit type, edit the structure, you'll see this material, CA01, and under the appearance tab, I have this image with a specific dimension. That's because usually these flooring manufacturers provide textures for specific carpet tiles or vinyl tiles, and they have a specific size for those swatches or those textures. So if you have those specific dimensions and you have the high quality image already, you can already set it in Revit so that later on you don't have to replace that material once it's in Twinmotion. So I usually do it for flooring materials. Sometimes I think I've also applied it for the table here. So if I isolate this, you'll see I have the laminate applied to this tabletop. Never mind that you can see the seams at the moment. We will address this kind of problem later on in a different topic. But for now, just take note that for some specific materials, it's easier to set it to the correct size and look even here in our Revit model. The third point I'd like to take note of is that we can use the paint tool to apply specific material to some specific surfaces. So case in point, for this light cove or the ceiling cove, I applied a particular material here for this upstand. So if we look at our inspiration image here, we have a cove lighting on the sides of the ceiling. So here in Revit, all we need to do is make sure that that surface is distinct. This is actually an in-place component. So if I check this extrusion, its material is still set to gypsum wallboard, same as this one. But I just used the paint tool to apply a light cove material to this particular surface. So if you'll see here, I have a light cove material. I set it to yellow so that you can see it easily, and you just apply it to this surface. So later on, once it's in Twinmotion, we can easily adjust the properties of this light cove material to make it light emitting. So that's how easy we can achieve the cove lighting. And lastly, we should be aware of what's visible inside our default 3D view. What I mean by the default 3D view is the one that we see here under 3D views, under the project browser. If I double click this one, this is our default 3D view, the one with the brackets, or the one we will get when you click on this shortcut default 3D view icon. So this default 3D view is usually what Twinmotion will take in. So what we see here is what we will get inside Twinmotion. So it's actually a good idea to set this to the highest level of detail. So I've set it to fine, so that when it comes to Twinmotion, it's going to reflect all the finest detail we have for each and every element. And we should make sure there's nothing hidden, either temporarily or permanently. There shouldn't be any hidden objects, so that everything comes into Twinmotion, unless we intentionally hide something. For example, if we have for example, if we have plants, Revit plants inside our model, we definitely don't want to see that in Twinmotion, because there are much better plants that we can use for our renderings once it's in Twinmotion. So we can just hide that planting category here in our default 3D view, so we can actually turn off planting, and that way when we import this model into Twinmotion, we won't see all the elements under that planting category. So that way we can control what we actually import into Twinmotion. So to summarize those 4 points again, first is that we want all our Revit elements to have a distinct material applied to them. Second is we could apply some actual materials here in our Revit model even before we import it into Twinmotion. The third is that we can use the paint tool to apply materials to specific surfaces. And finally, we should be aware of what's visible in our default 3D view. If we take note of these 4 points, we can ensure a smooth workflow later on once we have our model inside Twinmotion.